The Widow of the Cart, a story of resistance and rebirth. Hello, dear friends. Welcome once again to a narrative that crosses time to touch our hearts. Today, I invite you on a journey to Imperial Brazil of 1869, where we'll meet Francisca, a woman who lost everything, but discovered that true wealth dwells in the strength we carry within ourselves. Our story of injustice transformed into hope, of tears that watered dreams, of a mother who faced storms to protect her daughters. In times when a colonel's word was worth more than justice, a simple widow proved that dignity cannot be bought or stolen. But before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Leave your city, your country in the comments. I love knowing that our stories travel all around the world. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave that loving like. It helps so much for more people to discover these narratives that warm the soul. Year 1869, interior of São Paulo province, near the Piracicaba River, an era where the written word was worth more than tears, and the power of colonels extended like shadows over the coffee fields. The August rain fell like weeping over the clay rooftops of the small property, each drop carrying the weight of an omen that Francisca still couldn't decipher. Seated by the worn wooden window, her fingers traced invisible circles on the fogged glass while she watched her daughters sleeping. Antonia, 8 years old, and Maria Clara, 5, nestled like little birds under the patchwork quilt she had sewn in the early months of marriage. 4 months. Only 4 months since João had departed, taken by the typhus that had ravaged the region like a silent curse. The smell of eucalyptus and rue still permeated the rooms, ghosts of a lost battle against the disease that had robbed her of her companion, the father of the girls, the man who had planted coffee with his own hands on that blessed land. The sound of approaching hooves cut through the night's melancholy. Francisca rose slowly, her heart racing with a premonition that chilled her blood. Through the door's crack, she distinguished the silhouettes of 5 men on horseback, their dark capes undulating like vultures in the storm. At the front, she recognized the corpulent figure of Colonel Bento, her late husband's brother-in-law, a man whose grizzled beard couldn't hide the greed that gleamed in his small eyes. "Francisca!" The voice roared through the rain, authoritative and cold. "Open this door now!" Her hands trembled as she unlatched the lock. The colonel entered without ceremony, followed by Deputy Anacleto, a skeletal man whose thin mustache twisted in an unpleasant smile, and 3 gunmen who dripped dirty water on the freshly waxed floor. "I bring bad news, sister-in-law," said Bento, withdrawing a yellow document from his coat. The paper crackled between his thick fingers like ancient parchment. "I found this deed among João's papers. A gambling debt. Considerable." Francisca felt the world tremble beneath her feet. "What debt, Bento? João never gambled, you know that." The colonel's smile was cruel as a blade. 500,000 reis, dear sister-in-law, a fortune. And since there are no male heirs, he made a theatrical pause, savoring each word like someone tasting expensive wine. "The lands passed to whoever paid the debt. Me." The document trembled before her eyes. The imperial seal seemed authentic, João's signature perfectly imitated. But Francisca's heart screamed the truth that her mind still fought to accept. This was a farce, a macabre performance orchestrated to steal the last piece of ground where she could raise her daughters. "You have until dawn," declared Anacleto, his thin voice cutting the air like a razor. "You can take only what you carry in your hands." The door closed with a crash that echoed through the house like a farewell shot. Francisca remained motionless for long minutes, the cursed document still between her fingers, while the rain continued its melancholic symphony over the roof. In the bedrooms, the girls slept oblivious to the tragedy unfolding, their gentle breathing contrasting with the turmoil forming in their mother's chest. It was the end of a world, but also, without her knowing, the beginning of a journey that would transform her into the most powerful legend of that region. Dawn arrived pale and reluctant, as if the sun itself hesitated to witness the injustice unfolding. Francisca awakened her daughters with infinite tenderness, her hands caressing their disheveled hair, while explaining with carefully chosen words that they needed to embark on a new adventure. Antonia, older and perceptive, understood the dark subtext in her mother's eyes, but embraced Maria Clara with instinctive protection. Their belongings fit in 2 cloth bundles, some changes of clothes, Maria Clara's corn doll, João's grandmother's rosary, a handful of cornflour and brown sugar. Francisca also kept her wedding ring and a small amount in copper coins, her last defenses against a world that had become hostile. The walk through the Piracicaba Valley stretched like a whispered prayer. The girl's bare feet found every stone, every exposed root, while Francisca carried first one, then the other, her own strength waning with each step. The morning sun dried the previous night's rain, creating a ghostly mist that danced among the sugarcane fields. It was when Maria Clara's crying became uncontrollable that Francisca spotted the abandoned cart. Half hidden among bamboos and ferns, the old drover's cart lay like a ship run aground on time's shore. Its wood, once robust, now showed signs of surrender to time. Loose boards, broken axle, torn canvas that swayed in the wind like a flag of defeat. But for a desperate woman and two exhausted children, that ruin represented more than shelter. It was a promise of new beginnings. "Let's make this our little home," murmured Francisca, her voice choked with contained tears. For 3 days, they worked like industrious little ants. Francisca wove a wall of branches intertwined with vines, while Antonia collected broad leaves to line the floor. Maria Clara, still too small for heavy work, took charge of organizing the colorful pebbles she found, her innocent contribution to transforming that refuge into a home. The first night in the cart brought strange sounds: the creaking of old wood, the whisper of wind through cracks, the distant croaking of frogs by the river. Francisca remained awake, her senses alert like those of a wolf protecting her cubs, until exhaustion overcame her in restless sleep. It was in the early morning of the 4th day that luck smiled upon her for the first time in months. Donna Perpetua, widow of a small merchant, appeared on the road like an earthly angel, her dark skirts rustling among the vegetation. The older woman bore on her face the marks of genuine kindness, wrinkles that told stories of compassion, eyes that shone with maternal understanding. "Child," she said, observing Francisca mending a torn skirt with thread unraveled from another fabric. "You have skillful hands. I can arrange sewing work for you in the village." The first commission was a baptism dress for Captain Miranda's granddaughter. Francisca worked by candlelight, her fingers dancing over the cotton like an artist's over canvas. Each stitch carried not just technique, but a silent prayer for better days. When she delivered the piece, the payment of 2,000 reis seemed like a fortune. She bought beans, cornmeal, brown sugar, and for the first time since the expulsion, the girls slept with satisfied stomachs. But life in the cart held secrets that not even Francisca imagined. In the foundations of that improvised refuge, destiny kept a surprise that would change everything forever. The weeks followed like beads on an unstrung rosary, each day a small victory against adversity. Francisca discovered that survival was not just a matter of physical strength, but of constant reinvention, like water that adapts to the shape of the container that holds it. In the morning, while the girls still slept lulled by the song of thrushes, she would go down to the river to fetch water. The Piracicaba current murmured ancient secrets, and there, in the golden solitude of dawn, Francisca allowed herself a few minutes of melancholy, discreet tears that mixed with the river water, carrying her sorrows to other horizons. Her reputation as a seamstress spread through the village like jasmine perfume. Her hands transformed scraps into works of art, wedding quilts embroidered with impossible flowers, party clothes that enhanced the simplest beauty, patches that looked like intentional decorations. Each completed work was not just sustenance, but an affirmation of dignity. Antonia proved to be a precious helper. The girl learned to identify medicinal herbs: pennyroyal for stomach aches, fennel for colic, guava leaves for wounds. Her small hands became extensions of her mother's hands, weaving vines, cooking in a clay pot over an improvised stove. Maria Clara, younger and more dreamy, created imaginary universes where the cart was not exile, but an enchanted castle. Her games with corn dolls and colorful pebbles brought music to that refuge, crystalline laughter that drove away the ghosts of bitterness. It was when the first winter arrived that the true test presented itself. The June rain fell for 6 consecutive days, transforming the world into a blurred watercolor. The cart's canvas gave way in several points, creating leaks that dripped into bowls scattered across the floor. The cold penetrated the bones like invisible needles, and Maria Clara developed a persistent cough that robbed Francisca of sleep. On the 7th night, the girl's fever rose like high tide. Francisca recognized the symptoms with terror: malaria, the same disease that haunted the marshy regions. Without money for a doctor, she resorted to knowledge she had absorbed by watching the local healers. She gathered wild cinchona leaves in the forest, prepared teas of wormseed, made poultices with medicinal mud from the river. For 3 nights, she didn't close her eyes, applying cold compresses, whispering prayers, negotiating with God for her youngest daughter's life. On the morning of the 4th day, the fever broke. Maria Clara opened her eyes and smiled, a weak but genuine smile that was worth more than all the treasures in the world. Francisca wept with relief, embracing the girl as if she could protect her from all the evils of existence. This experience brought an unexpected discovery. The village women began to seek out Francisca to assist in births and care for simple ailments. Her hands, which already created beauty with thread and needle, proved equally skillful at healing. The first birth she attended was that of a drover's wife, a timid young woman who had been suffering contractions for 2 days. Francisca arrived when the village's official midwife had already declared the case hopeless, but she perceived that the baby was just poorly positioned. With patience and whispered prayers, she managed to bring the child into the world healthy and robust. The drover's gratitude translated into 2 chickens, half a sack of corn, and the promise of protection whenever needed. More important than the material reward was the recognition. Francisca had ceased being merely the widow of the cart to become Donna Francisca, the healer. But the true test of her new identity was yet to come. On a new moon night, while digging behind the cart to make a deeper well, Francisca's hoe struck something metallic that would forever change the course of her story. The new moon painted the world velvet black when Francisca decided to dig the well. It was the eve of St. Bartholomew, and the recent drought had left the river level dangerously low. With a hoe borrowed from Donna Perpetua, she worked silently, sweat dripping onto the thirsty earth while the girls slept under the stars. The metal rang against the tool's iron like a cracked bell. Francisca hesitated, her heart racing with a strange premonition. Perhaps it was just an old pot, a lost cart rim, but something in the quality of that sound, deep, hollow, promising, made her hands tremble with expectation. She excavated with redoubled care, brushing away earth with her fingers when the hoe became too crude. First appeared a corner of dark wood, then ornate ironwork. A chest, small but heavy, as if it held the dreams of the entire world. The lock had yielded to rust and time. When the lid opened, Francisca had to suppress a cry of surprise. In the flickering lamplight, hundreds of golden coins glittered like captured stars. More than coins, there were family jewels. A pearl necklace, emerald earrings, a ring with an unknown coat of arms, and documents carefully wrapped in oilcloth. The first letter, yellowed with nervous handwriting, revealed the mystery. Sebastião Pereira, a Portuguese merchant, recounted his desperation in 1864, when he had deserted from the Paraguay War, taking with him treasures he had found in abandoned farms. The euphemism fooled no one. These were spoils of war, riches looted during the conflict. "If someone finds this treasure after my departure," said the letter, "may they use it with more wisdom than I. I die without family, without forgiveness, carrying the weight of crimes I cannot undo. May these riches bring goodness where once there was greed." The second letter was even more revealing. Sebastião had bought the land where the cart now stood, but had died of yellow fever before he could build his house. The chest had been buried as insurance against thieves, a precaution that proved prophetic. Francisca counted the coins with trembling fingers. They were enough to buy an entire farm, perhaps 2, more wealth than she had ever imagined possessing. But that fortune came accompanied by moral responsibility that made her hesitate. For 3 consecutive nights she couldn't sleep. The weight of the gold was also the weight of decisions that could change not just her life, but her daughter's destiny. Would she use only what was necessary to survive, try to return it to the looted families, or accept it as destiny's gift? The answer came when Maria Clara woke with fever again. This time Francisca didn't hesitate. She discreetly sold 2 coins in Campinas, buying the best available medicines. The child recovered in 3 days, and Francisca understood destiny's message. That treasure was not a curse, but a tool to build justice where there was injustice, dignity where there was humiliation, hope where there was despair. But hiding a fortune in an abandoned cart presented unique challenges. Francisca divided the coins into small packages, burying them in different locations around the camp. Some jewels were sewn into the lining of her skirts, others hidden in clay pots buried near the river. From that night forward, Donna Francisca carried 2 secrets: her true identity as a respected healer and her secret condition as the richest woman in the region, a wealth that, paradoxically, would free her from poverty and allow her to fight for the justice that had been denied her. The first step would be to hire the best lawyer in the province. It was time to prove that Colonel Bento's false deed was nothing more than worthless paper. But something told her the battle had only just begun. The wisdom of survival had taught Francisca that haste was the enemy of prudence. For weeks she studied each move like a chess player before the decisive play. Sebastião's treasure was her ace in the hole, but it needed to be played with mastery to avoid arousing suspicion. On Monday mornings, when the village bustled with fair activity, Francisca undertook clandestine journeys. Dressed as a simple peasant with a bundle of clothes to sell, she traveled sometimes to Campinas, sometimes to Santos, never selling more than 2 or 3 pieces at a time to different goldsmiths. In Campinas, she met Senhor Joaquim Ferreira, an elderly Portuguese man who had been trading precious metals for 3 decades. The man had an experienced but discreet gaze, an essential quality for someone dealing with questionable fortunes. Francisca invented a plausible story. She had inherited some jewelry from her grandmother, deceased in Minas Gerais, and needed to sell them gradually to support her daughters. "They are old pieces of good provenance," evaluated Ferreira, examining an emerald ring through a special lens. "I can offer 300,000 reis, but I suggest you keep some. They are family heirlooms." In Santos, another merchant, Manuel da Costa Braga, proved equally professional. The transactions always took place on busy streets, disguised as routine purchases. Francisca learned to negotiate with subtle firmness, revealing enough knowledge not to be deceived, but not so much as to arouse curiosity about her origins. With accumulated resources, she could finally improve the cart's conditions. She bought new canvas, nails, treated wood. Antonia and Maria Clara watched in wonder as their mother transformed the precarious shelter into an almost comfortable dwelling. A partition created privacy. New mats covered the floor, and a small chest held clean, well-preserved clothes. "How did you get so much money, Mama?" asked Antonia, with the perceptiveness of an 8-year-old. "God blesses those who work honestly," replied Francisca, kissing her forehead. It was partial truth but not complete lie. Sewing orders increased. Francisca could now buy better quality fabrics, colored threads, mother-of-pearl buttons. Her creations became legendary in the region. Dresses that transformed simple girls into princesses, quilts that warmed not just bodies, but souls. Simultaneously, her reputation as a healer consolidated. She attended difficult births, cured mysterious fevers, consoled afflicted mothers. Her payment was rarely money. More frequently, she received chickens, sacks of beans, promises of protection, and something more valuable, information. That's how she learned of Colonel Bento's movements. The man was nervous, frequently visiting the district headquarters, speaking in low voices with Anacleto. Some drovers commented on seeing strangers prowling around the property that had been João's, as if searching for something specific. "They say the colonel is acting crazy," Donna Perpetua told her during a visit. "It seems he expected to find something in your old house, but didn't find anything." The information confirmed Francisca's suspicions. Bento hadn't expelled her family just out of greed. He knew or suspected something. Perhaps João had discovered the treasure before dying. Perhaps he had left clues that his brother-in-law had found. It was time to act. With 2,000 reis carefully accumulated, Francisca made the boldest decision of her life. She would hire the best lawyer in São Paulo province, Dr. Joaquim Moreira, a bachelor trained at Largo São Francisco and known for his competence in rural property matters. On a sunny September morning, she wore her best dress, the one she had sewn for the peace judge's daughter's wedding, and went to the lawyer's residence in São Paulo. The man received her with initial skepticism, but when Francisca placed the full amount of 1,500,000 reis on the table, his eyes lit up with professional interest. "Are you sure you can pay these fees?" asked Dr. Moreira, a thin man with grizzled beard and penetrating eyes. "I am, doctor, and I can pay more if necessary. I want just one thing, to prove that I am the legitimate owner of the lands that were stolen from me." The die was cast, but Francisca didn't imagine that her movements had already reached the wrong ears and that the next play would come not from the courts, but from much more dangerous shadows. Dr. Joaquim Moreira proved to be as meticulous an investigator as he was a competent jurist. For 2 weeks he dove into the county archives like a prospector searching for gold, unearthing documents, examining seals, comparing signatures. His discoveries were devastating to the farce orchestrated by Colonel Bento. The deed presented as proof of Joan's debt contained glaring irregularities. The imperial seal had been applied with more recent ink. Joan's signature showed tremors non-existent in genuine documents, and the declared witnesses weren't even in the region on the supposed date of the transaction. "Senora Francisca," said the lawyer during a private meeting in his office, "this document is gross forgery. Any competent judge would annul the property transfer, but the discoveries also brought disturbing revelations." Dr. Moreira had discreetly spoken with former acquaintances of João, and several mentioned strange conversations that Francisca's late husband had had with his brother-in-law in the weeks before his death. "Your husband seemed worried about something," reported the lawyer. "He spoke of buried secrets and dangerous inheritances. A drover swore he saw him arguing intensely with Bento near the Piracicaba River, just days before falling ill." The information chilled Francisca's blood. Had João discovered the treasure? Had he told his brother-in-law? The chronology suggested sinister possibilities. Had the typhus that killed her husband really been natural disease, or— She preferred not to complete the thought. Some mysteries were too dangerous to be unraveled. While Dr. Moreira prepared the judicial petition, other movements unfolded in the shadows. Colonel Bento was not a man to accept defeats peacefully. His informants in the village, and there were many as his influence extended like a spider's web, reported Francisca's mysterious comings and goings, her increasingly better clothes, the cart's transformation into an almost prosperous dwelling. "The widow has a lot of money," whispered Anacleto during a nighttime conversation at the colonel's farm. "More than sewing and healing would justify. Something's not right." Bento chewed on this information like a dog gnawing a bone. Francisca had always been a simple woman, without family resources. Where did the resources come from to hire an expensive lawyer? How could she support her daughters with such comfort? Suspicion grew in his mind like weeds. In the early morning of a grey Thursday, he ordered discreet surveillance of the cart. 2 of his gunmen would take turns spying on the widow's movements, noting her absences, observing her habits. If she was hiding something, he would discover it. Francisca, however, hadn't survived months of marginality without developing sharp instincts. She noticed the watchers on the second day, shadows moving among the trees, silhouettes that disappeared when she looked directly. Her heart tightened with fear for her daughters, but her mind worked with strategist's coldness. If Bento suspected her sudden prosperity, she needed a convincing explanation. In conversations with clients, she began spreading a carefully constructed story. A distant aunt in Minas Gerais had left a small inheritance, some old jewels she was selling gradually to supplement her income. Simple story, impossible to verify, plausible enough to justify modest improvements. Simultaneously, she intensified her activities as a healer. She began attending more complex cases, charging slightly higher fees. When questioned about her growing prosperity, she pointed to her expanded reputation and more affluent clientele. But tension grew like a storm on the horizon. One morning, Antonia returned from the village with alarming information. "Mama, I heard Señor Chiquinho saying that the colonel is asking about you to everyone. He wants to know if you had rich relatives, if Papa left hidden money." Francisca embraced her daughter, hiding her own distress. Bento's informal investigation was intensifying. It was a matter of time before he discovered some inconsistency in her stories, some clue that would lead him to the true treasure. That night, after the girls slept, she walked to the river under the silvery moonlight. The current murmured ancient secrets while she pondered increasingly scarce options. Could she flee with her daughters? But where? Could she continue feigning poverty, but for how long? Or could she confront Bento directly, using resources to hire protection? The answer came in the form of hoofbeats approaching in the darkness. Francisca ran to the cart, silently awakened the girls, prepared for the worst. This time, Bento wasn't coming just with false documents. He was after the real treasure and was willing to do anything to obtain it. The waning moon hid behind clouds when 6 men on horseback surrounded the cart. Francisca instantly recognized Colonel Bento's figure in the lead, but now he didn't come disguised as legality. The gunmen accompanying him carried machetes and pistols, their faces hardened by time and violence. "We don't need theater anymore, Francisca." The colonel's voice cut through the night like a blade. "We know you found the treasure that João hid before dying." Francisca's heart hammered against her ribs, but her voice came out firm as stone. "I don't know what treasure you're talking about, Bento. I live by sewing and healing, as everyone knows." The colonel's harsh laugh echoed among the trees. "Sewing? Woman, you hired a lawyer who costs more than an entire farm. Your dresses are silk. Your girls eat meat every day. Where did you get so much money? Aunt Gertrude's, from Uro Preto, Francisca began, but Bento interrupted with an impatient gesture. Lies, I had it checked. There's no aunt in Uro Preto. João told me about the find before dying, a chest buried by the crazy Portuguese. He just didn't say where it was hidden. The confession froze Francisca's blood. João had really discovered the treasure, but apparently had died before revealing its location. Now Bento and his henchmen came to claim by force what they couldn't find through cunning. If you don't hand it over voluntarily, continued the colonel, dismounting with predatory movement, we'll turn over every inch of this land until we find it. And your girls, well, accidents happen when you mess with dangerous people. It was a direct threat to the children. Francisca felt fire running through her veins, transforming fear into maternal fury. She prepared to fight with her bare hands when the sound of other hooves cut through the night's tension. I wouldn't do that if I were you. The voice came from the darkness beyond the trees. Then 5 armed men emerged from the shadows, silently circling Bento's group. At the front rode a man with broad shoulders, well-kept beard, and eyes that had seen much violence. He wore a faded uniform but still recognizable, ex-military from the Paraguay War. Captain Joaquim Mendonça, he introduced himself, addressing Francisca, but keeping his eyes fixed on Bento. I beg your pardon for arriving unannounced, but I noticed the lady was in trouble. Bento recoiled instinctively, recognizing the type of man he faced. Joaquim wasn't an ordinary gunman, but a trained soldier, real war veteran. His companions demonstrated the same military discipline, strategic positioning, weapons wielded with professional competence. This isn't your business, Captain, growled Bento, but his voice had lost its former authority. It becomes my business when I see 6 armed men threatening a defenseless widow and her children, replied Joaquim, his voice calm but loaded with determination. I suggest you mount your horses and leave, now. Tension hung in the air like gunpowder about to explode. For long seconds the two groups measured each other, calculating chances, weighing consequences. Finally, Bento spat on the ground and gestured to his men. This isn't over, Francisca, he threatened before mounting. Someday they won't be around to protect you. We will be, responded Joaquim simply. Every day, every night. It's a promise. The gunmen departed like malignant ghosts, dissolving into darkness. Francisca remained motionless until the sounds of hooves disappeared completely, then collapsed on a fallen log, her legs trembling with belated relief. Why did you help us? She asked, watching the captain dismount with graceful movement. Joaquim fell silent for a moment, his eyes lost in distant memories. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of ancient sadness. I lost my wife and daughter in the war, Senora, not to Paraguayan bullets but to disease and hunger while I fought far from home. Since then I swore never again to allow innocence to suffer when I can prevent it. From that night forward, Francisca knew she had found not just protection, but perhaps something more precious, a man whose honor was worth more than any buried treasure. But she still needed to solve the problem of Colonel Bento, and for that, Sebastião's gold would finally be used for its true destination. The autumn of 1870 arrived painted in gold and promises. Dr. Joaquim Moreira had completed his meticulous investigation, gathering irrefutable evidence of the farce perpetrated by Colonel Bento. The case would run in the county tribunal, but the lawyer alerted Francisca to the challenges ahead. The law is on our side, he explained during a meeting in his office, papers scattered across the table like cards from a legal deck. But Bento has political influence. We need more than evidence. We need protection. Francisca smiled with serenity that surprised the jurist. The protection, Doctor, is already guaranteed. Indeed, the presence of Captain Joaquim Mendonça and his men had transformed the conflict's dynamics. The veteran military man had established camp near the cart, creating a security perimeter that discouraged hostile approaches. But more than physical protection, Joaquim had brought legitimacy. His reputation as a war hero opened previously closed doors. The trial was scheduled for a sunny Tuesday in May. Francisca wore her best outfit, a dark blue dress she had sewn herself, with embroidered sleeves and lace collar. It wasn't ostentation, but an affirmation of dignity. Antonia and Maria Clara stayed under Donna Perpetua's care, who promised to pray the entire rosary for justice's victory. The courthouse buzzed with onlookers. The story of the brave widow facing the powerful colonel had spread through the region like wildfire in dry grass. Farmers, merchants, drovers, and village women occupied all available benches. Colonel Bento arrived accompanied by 3 lawyers hired from São Paulo, men in black coats with arrogant expressions who spoke whispering among themselves. Their strategy was simple: present Francisca as an unscrupulous adventurer who had forged documents to claim someone else's property. Dr. Moreira, however, had prepared devastating surprises. The first blow came with technical expertise of the imperial seal. An official document expert, brought especially from Rio de Janeiro, demonstrated that the ink used in the seal was 15 years more recent than the paper. Irrefutable chronological impossibility. The second blow was the graphological analysis of João's supposed signature. Compared with genuine documents, marriage certificate, original property deed, personal letters, the forgery became obvious even to lay eyes. But the coup de grace came with witnesses. Dr. Moreira had located the men supposedly present at the property transfer. One of them, an honest merchant from Campinas, confirmed under oath that he had never witnessed such a transaction. Another, already deceased, had left a diary where he recorded daily activities and mentioned no meeting with João on the date in question. Bento's defense crumbled like a house of cards in the wind. His lawyers tried to argue technical issues, but the evidence was overwhelming. When the judge, Dr. Armandio Ferraz, an upright magistrate known for impartiality, pronounced the sentence, his voice echoed through the hall like thunder of justice. This court declares null the deed presented by the defendant, as it is a falsified document with fraudulent intent. The property in question returns to its legitimate owner, Senhora Francisca Maria dos Santos, widow of João dos Santos. Furthermore, defendant Bento Carlos de Oliveira will answer for the crime of fraud, his immediate imprisonment being decreed. The tumult that followed mixed applause from Francisca's supporters with protests from the colonel's allies. Bento tried to resist arrest, alleging political persecution, but the judicial escort soldiers carried out the order without hesitation. Anacleto, the corrupt deputy, was summarily dismissed and expelled from the corporation. His police career had ended in public disgrace that would accompany him for the rest of his life. When Francisca emerged from the courthouse, she found a crowd waiting on the steps. Women she had helped in childbirth, men whose families she had healed, children who played with her daughters, all applauding the victory of justice over tyranny. But the most emotional moment came when she spotted Antonia and Maria Clara running toward her, followed by Joaquim, who smiled with genuine pride. There, in her daughter's arms, with the honorable man who had become her protection, and perhaps something more, Francisca finally understood the true meaning of wealth. Sebastião's gold had bought justice, but it was love, courage, and dignity that built the true victory. Summer arrived like a blessing after the judicial storm. The recovered land stretched green and promising under December's generous sun, but Francisca knew that possessing the property was only the first step. Transforming it into a prosperous home would require work, investment, and above all, reliable partnership. Joaquim Mendonça revealed himself to be a man of multiple talents. Besides military experience, he possessed agricultural knowledge acquired in youth when he had helped his father on a farm in the São Paulo interior. His suggestions for cultivating the lands demonstrated practical wisdom tempered by war experience, where he had learned to maximize scarce resources. "This land is ideal for sugarcane in the lowlands," he explained during a morning walk through the fields, pointing to dark soil near the river. "And coffee on the slopes. With adequate planning, in 3 years we'll have harvests sufficient to sustain an entire village." Daily proximity with Joaquim brought unexpected discoveries. The man she had known as a warrior demonstrated surprising delicacy with the girls. He taught Antonia to identify soil types, told adventure stories to Maria Clara, always carefully edited to omit war's horrors, helped Francisca with household tasks without being asked. More importantly, he spoke with respect about João, never trying to erase the deceased's memory or assume a position that wasn't his. He recognized being a visitor in Francisca's heart, awaiting an invitation that might never come. The property's transformation began with building a dignified house. Using part of Sebastião's treasure, Francisca hired experienced carpenters who erected a wood and adobe residence with 4 bedrooms, wide veranda and spacious kitchen. Nothing ostentatious, but solid and welcoming. The old cart wasn't abandoned. At Antonia's suggestion, it was preserved as a memorial and shelter for needy travelers. "It was our first real home," argued the girl with precocious wisdom. "Other people might need it too." The first months in the new house brought simple joys worth more than gold. Coffee shared on the veranda at dawn, the girls' laughter echoing through spacious rooms, the smell of fresh-baked bread that Francisca prepared on Sundays. Joachim kept his own room in the annex built for workers, but dined with the family every night. His stories, carefully selected, fascinated the children and brought distant worlds to the simple table. He spoke of cities visited, people met, landscapes that seemed from adventure books. It was during one of these conversations that Maria Clara, with 6-year-old frankness, asked the question that hung in the air like jasmine perfume: "Is Señor Joachim going to marry Mama?" The silence that followed was heavy with expectations. Francisca blushed, Antonia smiled with childish wisdom, and Joachim hesitated like a soldier before a minefield. "That," he said finally, "depends on your mother accepting me as a suitor." The formal proposal came on a March afternoon, when the first coffee seedlings began sprouting on the slopes. Joachim found Francisca sewing on the veranda, her loose hair shining in the setting sun. He knelt before her with the respect of one asking for blessing, not favor. "Francisca, you know my heart carries war scars. I also know yours carries sacred memories of João. I don't intend to replace him or erase what you lived, but I offer my life, my protection, my work, and all the love I'm still capable of giving." The answer came in the form of tears, not of sadness, but gratitude for finding a man who understood the difference between new love and lost love. Joachim wasn't asking her to forget the past, but to build a future where both memories could coexist in peace. The wedding was set for June, on St. Anthony's feast. Simple ceremony at the Rosary Church, followed by celebration for the entire community that had supported Francisca in difficult times. The bride wore a white dress she had sewn especially for the occasion, with embroidery telling the story of her journey. Carts, coffee flowers, stars that guide lost travelers. On the wedding morning, while arranging Francisca's hair, Antonia whispered, "Mama, Papa would be happy seeing you like this." It was true. João had loved Francisca enough to desire her happiness even after his departure, and Joachim loved her enough to honor that memory by building something new without destroying what had been sacred. The future stretched promising, like a well-tended plantation. But there was still one last secret to be revealed, a confession that would test the solidity of the newly built foundations. The honeymoon was lived on the farm itself, amid the perfume of flowering coffee plants and the murmur of the river that had witnessed so many transformations. Joachim adapted to family routine with naturalness that surprised Francisca. A man accustomed to commanding troops now shared parenthood with 2 spirited girls who adopted him as father without reservations. The first months of marriage passed in domestic harmony that seemed like a dream after so many nightmares. Joachim had taken over plantation management with military competence applied to agriculture. He hired free workers, categorically refusing to use slave labor, organized crop rotation, built an irrigation system that took advantage of the river's proximity. The 1871 harvests exceeded all expectations. The brown sugar produced in the small mill they built gained regional reputation for superior quality. The coffee, still young, promised abundant crops in the following years. Prosperity came as reward for honest work and careful planning. But material success also brought moral responsibilities that weighed on Francisca's conscience. Sebastião's treasure remained partially buried, its secret known only to her. There were moments, especially during nightly prayers, when she felt the weight of a mission like a stone in her chest. The issue had become more complex with the arrival of new family members. Antonia, now 12, demonstrated precocious maturity and perspicacity that painfully reminded her of her mother. Maria Clara, at 9, maintained the spontaneous joy that illuminated even the greyest days. Both treated Joachim as a true father, but preserved fond memories of João. In September 1872, Francisca discovered she was expecting a child. The news brought joy mixed with apprehension. How would she explain to the future child the origin of the family's prosperity? How would she justify wealth that didn't come only from agricultural work? It was during a winter night, when Joachim was telling war stories to the sleepy girls, that Francisca made the most difficult decision of her adult life. She waited until everyone slept, prepared chamomile tea, and called her husband for serious conversation on the veranda. "Joaquim, I need to tell you something that might change your opinion of me." The grave tone alarmed him immediately. In military campaigns, he had learned to recognize decisive moments by the weight they carried in the air. He sat before his wife, preparing for any revelation. Francisca told everything: the chest's discovery, finding Sebastião's letters, gradual use of resources to reclaim the lands, hire the lawyer, build the new life. She spoke of moral scruples that tormented her, sleepless nights, questioning whether she had the right to that gold stained with Paraguayan blood. Joaquim listened in silence, his face illuminated only by the lamp that flickered between them. When Francisca finished, he remained quiet for long minutes, processing revelations that changed his understanding of recent years. "Where are Sebastião's documents?" he finally asked. Francisca brought the letters carefully preserved in oilcloth. Joaquim read with the attention of someone accustomed to analyzing military reports, weighing each word, each implication. "This man was a deserter," he murmured after concluding the reading. "But he was also repentant. He left clear instructions for the treasure to be used with more wisdom than his." "But it's stolen money, Joaquim. I don't know if we have the right—" Her husband held her hands with tenderness that contrasted with his firm words. "Francisca, war produces injustices we cannot undo. Sebastião stole, it's true. But you used his resources to buy justice, protect children, build honest prosperity. If that isn't using with wisdom, I don't know what would be." Absolution came from a man who intimately knew war's horrors, who had lost his own family to absurd violence. If Joaquim considered the treasure's use legitimate, perhaps Francisca could finally forgive herself. That night, they walked to the cart preserved as memorial. Under stars that shone like ancient promises, they renewed vows to build a dignified future on foundations of the past, without denying mistakes committed by others, but transforming them into lessons of redemption. 3 months later, twins João and Pedro were born, names that honored both the girl's biological father and the patron of workers. The family was complete, and Sebastião's treasure had finally fulfilled its destination, not to buy luxuries, but to build love. The years that followed passed like seasons of a well-orchestrated symphony. The farm prospered under Joaquim's careful administration, which applied military discipline to work organization without ever forgetting workers' dignity. The coffee plantations extended across slopes like an emerald green carpet, promising abundant harvests. Antonia, now 15, had revealed a natural vocation for caring for people. She assisted Francisca in regional births, learned folk medicine with dedication that impressed even trained doctors. Her delicate hands possessed a special gift for calming pain and comforting the afflicted. "She'll be the province's best midwife," prophesied Donna Perpetua, who at 70 still visited the family weekly. Maria Clara had followed a different but equally valuable path. At 12, she already read fluently and demonstrated passion for books that Joaquim had brought from São Paulo. The village teacher, Dom Eugenio, had publicly declared that the girl possessed rare intelligence for literary studies. Francisca secretly nurtured dreams of seeing her attend normal school in the capital. The twins, João and Pedro, at 2 years old, noisy and full of energy, transformed each day into an adventure. João took after his original father, João, quiet, observant, fascinated by plants in the yard. Pedro had inherited a more expansive temperament, always inventing games involving running, jumping, and occasionally breaking some crockery. The memorial cart became an unofficial pilgrimage point for needy travelers. Francisca always kept a chest provisioned with clothes, blankets, and provisions for whoever needed them. "It was our first home," she explained to the children. "Now it can be refuge for other families in difficulties." During the harsh winter of 1875, the cart sheltered a family of German immigrants who had lost everything in a flood. For 3 weeks, the Müllers lived with Francisca's family, children playing together despite the language barrier, adults communicating through gestures and smiles. When they left to restart in lands further south, they left gratitude expressed in a touching letter that Francisca would keep forever. The farm's success brought community responsibilities. Joaquim was chosen captain of the local National Guard, a position he exercised with the same sense of justice he had demonstrated when protecting Francisca years before. Francisca became a reference for regional women. Her opinions were sought on matters ranging from culinary recipes to matrimonial advice. In 1876, Maria Clara announced a decision that surprised the family. She wanted to marry Dom Eugenio, the teacher. The man, widowed at 40, was known for his erudition and kindness, but the age difference caused initial concern. "He teaches me things I don't learn in books," explained the young woman with touching maturity, "and I make him smile like he hadn't since he lost his first wife." The marriage was blessed in the same Rosary Church, where Francisca and Joaquim had united. Dom Eugenio proved to be an exemplary son-in-law, visiting the family weekly and treating Joaquim with filial respect that warmed everyone's hearts. Antonia followed a different path, dedicating herself entirely to the art of healing. At 18, she was sought by farmers throughout the region when their wives expected difficult babies. Her hands had already brought more than 50 children into the world, all healthy, all surrounded by the care she had learned from her mother. The twins grew like two faces of the same coin. Joan demonstrated affinity with plants and animals that resembled mystical gifts. He knew when a cow was about to give birth, identified diseases in plantations before symptoms even appeared. Pedro revealed talent for mechanics, disassembling and rebuilding everything he found around. In 1878, Joaquim turned 50, surrounded by the family he had chosen to love. During an intimate party organized by Francisca, he looked around the table, Antonia telling stories of recent births, Maria Clara and Dom Eugenio discussing books, the twins arguing amicably about which dessert was better, Donna Perpetua blessing the food with tremulous but affectionate gestures. "Do you know what impresses me most?" he whispered to Francisca while observing the scene. "We built genuine happiness on foundations that seemed destroyed forever." It was true. The woman who had been expelled from home on a rainy night had transformed pain into strength, injustice into struggle, loneliness into extended family. Sebastião's treasure had bought freedom, but it was love, work, and dignity that built true prosperity. But life still held surprises, and the most exciting was on the way. The autumn of 1882 arrived painted in golden melancholy, bringing news that changed the farm's rhythm. Colonel Bento, after serving 7 years in prison, had been released for good behavior. The information came through Dom Eugenio, who maintained correspondence with county authorities. "They say he came out of jail transformed," reported the teacher during family dinner. "He lost all properties to pay court costs and indemnifications. He became a wanderer, living from small jobs." Joaquim received the news with the serenity of someone who had already faced greater dangers. A broken man rarely represents a threat, but will maintain vigilance as precaution. The concern proved unnecessary. Weeks later, Antonia returned from a trip to Campinas with a surprising story. "I found the former colonel working as a porter at the municipal market. He's unrecognizable, thin white hair, patched clothes. When he saw me, he asked for forgiveness. He cried like a child, Mama. He said prison taught him the value of others' dignity." Bento's transformation was complete and irreversible. The man who had once commanded gunmen now sustained himself carrying sacks of provisions for honest merchants. Poverty and age had broken his arrogance, revealing humanity that perhaps had always existed under layers of corrupt power. Francisca felt unexpected compassion for her former enemy. She instructed Dom Eugenio to seek him out discreetly, offering work on the farm. Nothing important, just services compatible with his physical limitations. Bento's pride initially refused, but hunger and winter cold eventually overcame resistance. The ex-colonel arrived on a grey July afternoon, mounted on a borrowed mule carrying only a small bundle with minimal belongings. Joaquim received him with respectful firmness, establishing clear rules. He would work caring for the vegetable garden, would be treated with dignity, but any problem would result in immediate expulsion. "I understand, Captain," responded Bento, with a voice that had lost all previous authority. "I thank you for the opportunity to show I've changed." The following months brought surprise for everyone. Bento proved to be a dedicated and careful worker. His hands, once accustomed to counting dirty money, now planted vegetables with almost maternal tenderness. During breaks, he sat with the twins, telling stories purged of violence, traveler adventures, legends about lost treasures, fables about talking animals. The ex-colonel's presence created interesting dynamics on the farm. The children treated him like an eccentric grandfather, without knowing his dark past. Joaquim maintained discreet but respectful vigilance. Francisca observed the transformation with a mixture of curiosity and admiration for humanity's capacity for redemption. In September of that year, Francisca's first granddaughter was born. Maria Clara gave birth to a healthy girl who received the name Hope, a choice that perfectly summarized the family feeling. Dom Eugenio proved to be a dedicated father, sharing care with his wife without abandoning professional responsibilities. Hope's baptism gathered the entire community at the Rosary Church. Francisca held her granddaughter with pride, while Father Anselmo blessed the child. Looking at the congregation, she saw faces that had accompanied her journey. Donna Perpetua, now 75 but still lucid, drovers who had known her since cart times, farmers who respected Joachim's work, women whose births Antonia had assisted. At the back of the church, discreet but present, Bento watched the ceremony with tears in his eyes. The man who had once tried to destroy her family now wept with joy at his great-granddaughter's birth, a transformation that demonstrated the redemptive power of time and mercy. After the ceremony, during the farm celebration, Francisca found a private moment with her former enemy. He sat alone under a mango tree, watching children playing in the yard. "Thank you," he said simply when she approached, "for giving me a chance to die as a decent man. Everyone deserves a second chance, Bento. You're making the most of yours." It was true. The ex-colonel would live 3 more years on the farm, time enough to see the twins growing, watch Antonia become a respected midwife, accompany the prosperity his greed had tried to destroy. He would die in peace, surrounded by the family he had learned to love as his own. His last word was forgiveness, both plea and grant that closed the circle of justice begun on a rainy night, 14 years before. The year 1897 arrived loaded with omens that Francisca felt like chills in her soul. At 53, her hair already showed silver threads that gleamed like silver in the sun, but her eyes maintained the same determination that had sustained her through so many storms. The farm prospered like never before. The coffee plantations produced grains of exceptional quality, the sugar mill supplied the entire region, and the family had grown like a tree with deep roots. Antonia, now 33, had become legend in the art of bringing children into the world. Her hands had assisted more than 300 births, and she had never lost mother or baby, a record that trained doctors secretly envied. Maria Clara and Dom Eugenio had 3 children, Hope, 15, and twins Gabriel and Rafael, 12. Francisca's boys, Juan and Pedro, at 25, administered different farm sectors with competence that made their adoptive father proud. It was on a golden March morning that the letter arrived. The mailman, Senor Amadeo, brought an official envelope with a federal capital seal, addressed nominally to Senora Francisca dos Santos Mendonça. The sender was a lawyer from Rio she had never heard of, Dr. Armando Silveira, and associates. Joachim, now 62 but still vigorous, read the correspondence with furrowed brows of concern. The content was unusual. A mining company had discovered old documents mentioning treasure buried on property near the Piracicaba River, São Paulo province. They wanted to investigate Francisca's lands, offering generous compensation for any findings. "It's about Sebastio's gold," murmured Francisca, feeling the weight of ancient secrets returning like ghosts. After so many years, there are still people looking. The matter became complicated when other interested parties appeared. A supposed great-nephew of Sebastio Pereira, armed with genealogical documents, claimed rights over inheritances left by the great-uncle. Antique dealers offered substantial sums for historical artifacts that might be hidden on the property. For weeks, the farm transformed into a center of unwanted attention. Curious people appeared daily, some offering money for permission to excavate, others simply snooping, hoping to discover something valuable. Family tranquility was disturbed by an avalanche of interest that threatened to destroy the peace conquered after decades of work. It was Antonia who suggested the wisest solution. "Mama, why don't you tell the truth? You always said lies have short legs. Maybe it's time to reveal what really happened." The proposal initially frightened Francisca. For almost 30 years she had kept the secret like a personal treasure, shared only with Joachim. Revealing the truth meant exposing to public scrutiny decisions she had made in desperate moments, justifying choices that didn't always follow written laws. But external pressure increased daily. Speculators bought neighboring lands, hoping discoveries on Francisca's property would raise values throughout the region. Capital journalists sent correspondents to investigate the mystery of the São Paulo treasure. The situation had become unsustainable. The final decision came during a family meeting on a stormy April afternoon. Gathered in the main room, Francisca, Joachim, the 4 children, Dom Eugenio, and even Donna Perpetua, now 90 but still lucid, they debated available options. If we hide the truth, argued Pedro with engineer's logic, they'll keep looking forever. But if we tell how it was, maybe they'll accept there's nothing more to find. João agreed with wisdom, inherited from his biological father. The lands are worth much more as productive farm than as excavation site. Truth can protect our future. Maria Clara, always practical, added, and the grandchildren deserve to know the family's complete history. We don't want them to discover through strangers. The vote was unanimous. The next morning, Francisca convened a public meeting at the village church. Father Anselmo, now elderly but still respected, offered the pulpit so she could speak to the community that had known her for 3 decades. The temple filled completely. Farmers, merchants, workers, women with children in arms, curious people from distant cities, all wanted to hear the official version from the woman who had become regional legend. Francisca ascended the pulpit with queenly dignity. She wore a simple but elegant outfit, sewn by her own hands decades before. Her voice, firm and clear, echoed through the stone naves as she told the complete story. The unjust expulsion, months in the cart, discovery of the chest, Sebastião's letters, gradual use of resources to regain dignity and build honest prosperity. I used blood-stained gold to buy justice, she concluded, looking directly at familiar faces. If this was sin, I ask God and the community for forgiveness. If it was wisdom, I thank for the opportunity to transform something bad into something good. The silence that followed lasted eternal seconds. Then slowly, someone began to applaud. Soon the entire church vibrated with ovation that lasted several minutes. That afternoon, truth freed Francisca from the burden she had carried all her adult life. But it also marked the beginning of a new phase, where she would be judged not by the gold she had found, but by the love she had built. Francisca's final years passed like golden twilight of a fully lived life. The public revelation about Sebastião's treasure, far from causing scandal, elevated her reputation in the region even more. The community understood that she had transformed casual discovery into a tool of social justice, using questionable resources for unquestionably noble ends. The farm became a model of shared prosperity. Francisca and Joaquim implemented a pioneering system where workers received profit participation. Workers' children attended school, maintained by the property, and needy families always found open doors. The old cart, preserved as memorial, continued serving travelers in difficulties. Antonia finally married at 40 to Dr. Fernando, a young doctor who had come to the region to work at the hospital Francisca had helped found. The couple had no children of their own, but adopted 3 orphans whom they raised as their own blood. The province's most respected midwife had found a companion who valued her dedication to the healing arts. João and Pedro followed different but complementary paths. João assumed administration of the coffee plantations, applying innovative agricultural techniques that made the farm a quality reference. Pedro moved to São Paulo, where he built an agricultural equipment company that supplied machinery to farms throughout the state. Both remained united by the values Francisca and Joaquim had taught them. Maria Clara and Dom Eugenio aged together like 2 intertwined trees. Their children became teachers, doctors, engineers, professionals who honored their education by applying knowledge for collective benefit. Hope, the firstborn, followed her grandmother's vocation for sewing, creating a workshop that employed dozens of women from the region. In 1905, when Francisca turned 61, the family organized a celebration that brought together more than 200 people. Former employees traveled from distant cities. Women whose births Antonia had assisted brought children now grown. Local authorities paid homage to the matriarch who had helped develop the entire region. During an emotional speech, Francisca looked at the audience and saw reflection of a well-lived life. Faces she had known for decades, children who had grown playing on her lands, young people who had received education at the farm school. More than material prosperity, she had built a network of relationships based on mutual respect and genuine solidarity. When I was young, she said with a voice that still maintained firmness, I believed wealth was measured in gold coins. Life taught me that true fortune is the people we love and who love us in return. Joaquim, now 70 but still lucid and affectionate, remained by his wife's side through all those years. His passion for Francisca had never diminished. If anything, it had matured like fine wine, gaining depth with time. He died 3 years after the Great Celebration, in 1908. surrounded by family and whispering words of love to the woman who had transformed his last 28 years into the happiest of his existence. Francisca lived 5 more years as a serene widow, dedicating herself to grandchildren and great-grandchildren who filled the farm with children's laughter. She spent mornings teaching older girls to sew, afternoons telling stories to little ones who crowded around her rocking chair on the veranda. In March 1913, on a sunny morning when jasmine perfumed the air with promises of spring, Francisca didn't awaken from peaceful sleep. She died as she had lived, surrounded by love, leaving a legacy of dignity, having transformed each challenge into an opportunity for growth. Her funeral was a regional event. People traveled from distant cities to pay final homage to the woman who had become legend. The cortege extended for miles, including rich farmers and poor workers, trained doctors and simple healers, children she had helped bring into the world, and elderly she had comforted in old age. On the white marble headstone, they engraved an epitaph she had chosen herself. Francisca dos Santos Mendonça transformed tears into seeds, planted justice, harvested love. The cart was preserved by unanimous family decision, transformed into an official monument of the city that had grown around the farm. A bronze plaque tells the condensed story of the woman who found buried treasure, but discovered that true wealth lay in human hearts. Still today, more than a century later, travelers seek the old cart when passing through the region. Some come for historical curiosity, others seeking inspiration to face their own difficulties. All leave carrying the same lesson Francisca taught through example. No matter how dark the night, new dawn will always come for those who keep hope burning in their hearts. Francisca's story proves that destiny is not chance's imposition, but daily construction of courageous choices. She chose to transform injustice into struggle, loneliness into family, despair into hope. And she discovered that the greatest treasure anyone can find is not buried in earth, but planted in the human soul, the infinite capacity to love, forgive, and begin again.